factor of farming in the Hamptons really has to do with the long growing season and with the soil. Where else do you go in this country to find families who have lived and continuously farmed the same land for over 300 years?
I came home in 1980s from the West Coast visiting and saw that the farm next door had a for sale sign on it. And I knew the family very well, called them up and asked them what had happened. And they explained to me that their parents had passed away and that they had a huge federal inheritance tax. So a 10-generation farm was essentially sold to pay a tax on a farm, not based on what it was, but what it could be. Many, many houses.
The number of farms and people involved in agriculture has been declining, partly because of the lifestyle, the work requirement, high barriers to entry, costs of capital, things like that.
On Long Island especially, it's cost prohibitive to, I think, own a farm. If you're a starting out farmer, or even if you're an established farmer and you're looking for more land, I mean, land prices are sky high.
It occurred to me, and to several other people here, that we really needed an organization that would work with landowners and farmers in particular to give them options to conserve their land. And that being the case, we founded the Peconic Land Trust in 1983.
It's not just good enough to have land, because we actually have open land, but now with the deer pressure, you need fencing, you need equipment, so it's not just land, it's the other things too. That's where we come in here at the Trust.
You're sleepwalking with a delirious head. We were programmed a long time ago. Your stories are wrong, and your acclamation is slow.
I was working as a banker. It was kind of toxic. And I wanted to do something that I was more passionate about, and that certainly wasn't it. My wife and I started getting involved in the local food movement in Manhattan. She goes, Chris, you know, the only way you're ever going to find out if farming's for you is you just got to go do it. I had heard that the Peconic Land Trust had, would lease land to farmers. And so I started noodling around. I made a couple phone calls. I basically saw the pasture. I liked it. We sort of worked out the details of the lease, and, off we went. This is an egg mobile. It's got the egg layer chickens in it. We're actually raising two different kinds of chickens. The first is the standard meat chicken, which is the Cornish Cross. It is a very fast-growing chicken. It has large breasts, lots of meat. We experimented last year with something called a red broiler. In France, they call it La Belle Rouge. These are chickens that grow slower. Their meat is a little bit darker, and because it takes them longer to grow, they have a little bit more of a gamey flavor. We usually process our chickens around 7 to 8 weeks. Through trial and error, we've learned that, we can do about 50 chickens in processing in one day. And that doesn't sound like much, but for a team of 2 or 3 people, that's about what we can do. That was a little bit of a surprise to me. I didn't realize it was so difficult to kind of go through that process. We recycle everything associated with the processing. So the blood, the offal, the feathers, we compost all of that, and we put it out to help add nutrients to the pasture. I realized that no one was doing pastured poultry on Long Island, and I thought, this is a niche that I could probably fill. That was the beginning of Browder's Birds.
It's probably a bit shocking that 2 young ladies, not from here, never farmed before, are farming. After college, I worked in a foreign policy job and was ready to make a move and was looking to do something, create something, make something, and it turned into wanting to grow something. Somebody gifted me, in leaving that job, Scott Chasky's book, This Common Ground. So I wrote him a letter and I said, I'd like to come learn how to farm. And he said, come on out.
We've been running the farm with apprentices for 20 years. And the idea is, after the apprenticeship, to continue on. Once someone has apprenticed on a farm, of course they want to get into it themselves. And if we find land or the right situation, then we establish a lease and, help them with the tractor work to begin with and help them get going, basically.
Katie and I started talking seriously about continuing to farm together and the sorts of farms that we would like to do. So there's, 10 hours a day out in the fields for you to talk and think. And so we were throwing out ideas like a pizza farm or a fabric farm or, something fabulous.
First of all, it's remarkable, I think, that you can gain the skill set that you feel empowered enough to grow your own food on your own farm just after a short 10-month period. The Amiganzet Wheat Project is a project that Amanda and I thought would be, wow, wouldn't it be great if we could bake a local loaf of bread? And so nobody on Long Island right now is growing organic wheat for food consumption. Wheat was grown here, not more than 50 years ago. There were hundreds of acres in East Hampton, people that were growing wheat, hence the windmills that are around.
Grains are an especially important component of any regional food system's sustainability. And so we wanted to focus on that. It's funny because I'm like, don't want to get a dog because I don't want to be tied down. But here we are with this lease on this 8 acres, and I feel like we have gotten to know every square foot of this property really well. Even down to, there are 7 crows that live on this farm.
We're trying to do everything that we can to ensure that conserved farmland can be used by startup farmers, people looking to get into the business. And by the way, they can be young, old, it doesn't matter.
I come out at 5 o'clock every morning, and I don't go back, especially in the July when the day is long, till 9 o'clock night. I stay right here for some time. I knew nobody out here. I started looking some land, and I got in touch with Peconic.
Roderick Brown, who is a great story, he is growing all kinds of vegetables. Mostly, though, it looks like he's growing them for specific markets. If I'm not mistaken, Korean markets.
He grows a lot of stuff that we don't know a whole lot about. Matter of fact, when you walk out in the field and kind of look for it, it looks kind of like weeds to me. But he pulls this thing out that looks like a weed, and he cuts it into little pieces, and you taste it, and you taste the weed along next to it, and it definitely tastes different than the weed does.
This is like a Jamaica staple, breakfast staple. It's amaranth. Actually, what you do is dice it in small pieces, all the way up, leaf and stem. Then we some oil, a little garlic, a little honey and saute, a little salt, a little butter, 15 to 20 minutes on low, slow fire, and you have a nice succulent callaloo meal, just like that.
He is one of our biggest success stories, that's for sure. I got to tell this one little story. The first thing you do in the spring is lay this plastic down. Generally, you use a tractor and an implement. The rolls are about 150 pounds, and they're 5 feet long. While everybody else, they roll them along the ground, they struggle with them. Well, Roderick, he puts a string through it and puts it around his neck, and he backs up through the field and spools this roll of plastic out. He's like a tractor in himself, Amazing.
I sat under that tree sometime, like last year, especially during the falls. And when I have a nice bed of stuff going, I enjoy that. That send me for a beer. Relax and look at it. Yeah, I really love it. I love farming. I don't want nothing else. I love it.
Ever since I was a kid, I was saving seeds in the fall. The fall would roll around and I'd start saving seeds. In my family, my father was a gardener. We had a love of, eating our own stuff and growing our own stuff. Tomatoes are like the rock star, and so are peppers. Really nobody eats a tremendous amount of hot peppers, but they look so cool. It's like amazing to go out there every day and see them. On this particular field, we have 250 different varieties of peppers, heirloom peppers. They're every conceivable size and shape. These are a really super hot variety. I think it might be Ecuadorian light green. Forget the cameras. Just look at my tomato. This is the first year that I grew this. It's called Velue striae. This is a new variety called Michael Pollen. By saving seeds, there's an interplay, there's some cross-pollination, you're just building a better, robust system. We're also taking obscure varieties that have more wild genetics in it and breeding that with well-known heirlooms to create hardier stock. Well, for tomato seeds, you basically have to ferment them. It's a very disgusting process. Everything really smells horrible, but it's basically you're brewing tomato seeds to get the gel off. It's what happens in nature when it falls to the ground. I don't think people really understand. They look at a tomato and they think a tomato is a tomato. I say I'm growing 350 varieties and people are kind of like, oh wow, that's really interesting, but so what? I just want a tomato.
We're used to cheap food in this country. And the bottom line is that cheap food is not healthy food.
We have a health problem in this country, as we all know, where we're diabetes and obesity and things like that. And one way to fight it is locally in a place like this, introducing kids in the schools to real food and healthy food. And that's exactly what Katie and Amanda at Amberways are doing.
We've found in doing several years of field trips with local school groups and then also with families who come here who are part of our CSA or just families that visit, is the change or the development in children that come to this farm and pick a carrot or pick a cherry tomato and are able to eat immediately what they're picking, I think gives people such an empowerment over their food choices for their life. And we want people to know and be associated with what's going on around them. And agriculture is a really important part of Long Island's heritage. And so we try to remind students of that and tell them what farmers do. And then also because we don't look like maybe what you would expect a farmer to look like. They come here and they're like, where are the farmers? Who is the farmer?
5 or 6 or even 10 years ago, there was maybe one farmer's market that people could get to. I think last summer there was one every day of the week. If you talk about chefs and restaurateurs, they come to those farmers markets because they think they can get the best produce there.
You know, why buy tomatoes from California that have been sitting, you know, in a refrigerator 3,000 miles to get here and then sitting in refrigerators in the Hunts Point market to be shipped out here to sit in somebody else's refrigerator before it hits the table, where you could buy something. You know, the beauty of buying all this stuff local is you buy it daily. People ask when they taste it in the restaurant, these beautiful tomatoes, they're like, wow, these are great, where can I get them? Our waiters, they know all about the farms, where they're coming from, where their farm stands are, and they can say you could go right down in Amiganzet to the Balsam Farms, you could grab their tomatoes right there.
The relationships we've cultivated with the chefs is almost as rewarding as the actual farming, you know, the business end of things, and talking to guys like Joe Ramito and just being able to go in dirty in the Hamptons and sit at the bar and get a good meal and be respected is real nice. We're making a living farming. It's possible. It's hard work. I think that I have seen a lot of people get into farming through the romantic ideas of what they believe it means, and you know, still maybe wanting weekends off, or, you know, Alex and I just don't do that. It's 7 days a week for
as long as the sun's up.
Yeah, well over half the year.
This is a hard life, and it's hard to make a living doing this. And so always when we talk to the other farmers, it always makes us feel great. We think, well, we're not alone in this.
There is what has formed very recently that we have named the tribe. So it's something that it's young farmers that share food, for sure. We do potlucks and gather socially. Since we're all in the beginning stages of this lifelong journey, this profession, it's something where we can bounce ideas off of each other.
And I think the community of young farmers, if they're all looking out for each other, they will go and do work on each other's farms when it's necessary. There is a reciprocity.
It is difficult to get started in farming. But the fact that some people now are actually interested in farming is a phenomenon that we haven't seen before. And I think it's a wonderful development.
Gets brushed and turned, and they end up totally different. The wash rind is very strong, punch and flavor, and
we get young farmers out here who want to learn about farming because there's a new interest on the part of young people in all this kind of thing. Some ways it's a little romantic, but God bless them.
I just want to emphasize how important it is to answer the call for all those young people who just want to find a way into meaningful work. And one way of defining that is by working with the soil.
The Farms for the Future initiative is all about ensuring that the next generation of farmers, or new farmers, they're not always young, has a place to go, and that they have the ability to access affordable farmland for generations to come.
We don't have a tremendous amount of soil like this left on anywhere, and it should be used for farming whenever it can be.